Kenneth Walker III should be in New York. I think he should have been a finalist. I don't know which one you remove off of that list, but I do think he should have been one of the top four.
Devontae Smith, touchdown, Alabama!
Intercepted by Charles Woodson. Collins off the Heisman.
They will not catch Lamar Jackson.
35-40, he's on his way. Desmond Howard is going all the way. That is a Heisman Trophy winner.
Okay, everybody, welcome back, and we have a very, very special guest today. Man, I don't know what can I say about this guy. He's a colleague. He does a tremendous job, not just in college football, but with all sports. But more importantly, he is the host of the Heisman Ceremony. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We have Chris Fowler today. What's up, CF?
Desmond, Jimmy, good to see you. I take great pride in that sentence, man. The host of the Heisman Trophy show, and I like hearing that. I mean, it's 28 years,
Wow.
28
Right.
years doing this now, and it's one of our Super Bowls every year. Our production views it that way. I do.
Right.
You get to the rush at the end of the season, but it's not over yet. You got this special week, which is intense, but really fun. And you know better than anybody the specialists of that room. We got a brand new room this year, so excited about it.
Excited about that. I'm very excited about it. And I gotta share something with you. So J Rowe, you know, my wife went to Maryland, right? And so I'm telling her, I was like, yeah, you know, we got Fowler on the show. So her response was, oh, okay, I can't wait to listen this time. I'm like, wait. Well, you don't listen to the podcast? She said, I listen, but I may not listen to the whole show. But if you guys are gonna have Fowler on there, I'll definitely listen to the whole show. So that's how much, you know, how much Fowler's respected in the Howard household.
What does Rebecca want to hear about? What will entertain Rebecca, Des? You tell me. We'll keep it going.
Maybe she's a big tennis fan. I got to tell you something. Chris has got all these credentials, you know, Wimbledon and you know, of course, the U.S. Open and college football and on and on and on. But I remember Fowler. Then the first time that Chris and I met was when we were working at ESPN 100 years ago, and he was the host of
Scholastic Sports America.
Yes,
You're going back to the mid '80s.
Yes,
Jimmy?
sir.
I looked 11 years old, man. What did you think? You see this kid who thought maybe they had called him to come work Sports Center, and they told him, no, we got other plans for you. It's a high school show. And I used to get mistaken for a high school kid in the hallways as we were filming our segments. I'm not kidding about that.
Yeah.
They would say, hey, where's your hall pass, kid? And the crew would just die laughing.
I do remember a clip that they trot out every now and again of you talking to Emmitt Smith when he was in high school. That's how long that show was.
Wow.
He was our first guest. Emmett was our first guest, Des. Pensacola Escambia High School. Yep.
That's crazy. That's bananas. Well, you know, CF, you sent out a post on Instagram, and you showed like some of your notes and I guess your laptop, and you were talking about your preparation for the Heisman show. Can you just walk us through what type of preparation it takes to get ready to do the Heisman show?
Yeah, it starts with the writing of the pieces. I mean, I for many years have written the small little features that describe these guys as football players. Usually the profile, the personal side of it precedes that. I'm involved in that, but I take great pride in sort of talking to coaches, talking to the guys themselves, which I've done this week. Still trying to track down Kenny Pickett. But yeah, and then you sort of try to distill that down, and then you try to figure out how do you tell in 30, 40 seconds what this guy brings, what distinguishes him from the others. So once the pieces get written, now you can voice them on your home microphone, which is a nice thing, and then send them off on your computer. That makes prep easier. But then it's just a matter of getting up to New York and getting a feel for things. And you can't really script this show on Monday or Tuesday, right? You got to get in the room. You got to start to feel it. And I do a lot on Fridays. We'll get with the players on Fridays when they get up to New York. I know you're involved in that too. So it's fun. It used to be at the old Downtown Athletic Club. We can talk about that. That was a very different thing to be in the 13th story of that old building downtown. And you'd stay in a room and you do all your prep on this little antique desk. And then you'd hit the elevator. You go down to 13, you get off, and you do this show, this crazy compact room.
Nothing like staying on campus, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, that was interesting, Jimmy. Some of the stories, because all the players and their families stayed on campus too. So there were a few instances, Desmond, back in your era, and then a little bit after that, when players would go out and they were enjoying the big city life and they were carousing and they would come back to the DAC. It's like sneaking into the dorm room or something. And you had to get past them. You had to get past the monitor in the lobby and get up to your room. And there was back in the day when there was less scrutiny, there weren't phones and cameras everywhere. Guys used to really enjoy that trip to New York. I'll tell you.
Here'd be my guess. Even though it's a different day these days, I'm thinking they're still really enjoying that trip to New York in just a different day, in just a different way, I should say. But Chris, I think to me that this year, as an observer, just seems like it's been more wide open until the end. And of course, nobody's really supposed to talk about who they voted for. But it just seems more wide open all year long than it's been in a long, long time. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. The season's more wide open and wild and less predictable. We saw some of the changing of the guard in some different conferences. We saw a lot of unranked teams beat ranked teams. People have talked about this being the year after COVID, and we're still not kind of settled down into normalcy, and that's a factor. But it definitely extended the Heisman race, Jimmy. I'm sitting on the field before the SEC championship game, before Bryce Young goes off against Georgia and punctuates his season. And people were talking like, who's going to be in New York? Who's going to make it? Who are you going to vote for? And there was uncertainty right down to the last day. And then I can't remember that before. Usually it's narrowed down, right? And there's so much information and so much scrutiny of the race. And the thing is so national now. The sport is so different than it was in other decades when regional considerations really came into play. Now everybody sees everybody play and everybody knows all the data. And there's this kind of national consensus, except this year there wasn't. And it was right down. I didn't know for sure, until the finalists were announced on Monday exactly, which names would be there. A couple you knew, but the other two slots, maybe it was really up in the air. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know that we're going to land on a ton of suspense by the time the envelope is open, but it's certainly been weird getting here, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has been. We talked about that earlier in the season. I even came up with an idea. I said my dream would be to not give it out. Like if it's not earned or it's not deserved, to not give it out. Now, I know this is a gig for you, so I don't want to take any food off your table. But I'm just thinking, like, if you don't really think anyone earned it or deserved it, then why even give the award out? Because we do have awards for every position. If the guy's the best quarterback, give him the Davey O'Brien. If he's the best running back, give him the Doak Walker and the Biletnikoff for the best receiver, and so on and so forth. But I do think that it came down to the wire, and we do have four guys who, we do have a list of guys who are more, some more deserving than others. Do you think we got the four finalists right?
I think your idea is crazy, by the way. Who's going to decide what's right? What do you guys just the winners get together and decide? Well, you know what? I don't think he's worthy of being in our club. We're just going to hold on to our trophy.
No. There'd be a choice D. Like none of the above.
There you go.
So
you go.
The guy next year wins two of them, right? It carries over. Like, I mean. When people say, like, first of all, let's just be clear. I think that the listeners here probably understand better than most, but we don't decide who to invite, right? Are we clear on that?
Right.
The voters decide. Right. And back in the day, they used to have the cutoff before all the votes came in, because the votes would kind of trickle in the mail. Like someone come in like Wednesday, Thursday, even Friday, would get to the thing and they would count their ballot like that close to the show. Electronically, it's all done, and it's done before the finalists are announced, and it's been that way for quite a while now. So we know who the top four are. So it's not an invitational thing. Let's just be clear about that, because people are mad. Michigan State fans, Kenneth Walker runs over your alma mater. Where is Kenneth Walker? How is he not there?
He didn't run over Ohio State.
There you go.
That's what happened. You got. Hey, I tell you, CF. I tell people, you have to perform big on the biggest stages. You can't just have one great game and think, okay, I'm gonna win it. And then not only did he not perform big, they laid an egg against the Buckeyes, and everyone's watching. Listen, heavy is the head that wears the crown. When you're that front runner, you got to go out there and put your A game on display every single time, especially in the big games. And I think that's what really hurt him.
And he also didn't have the stage by not playing in the Big Ten championship game. He didn't have that last stage. Kenny Pickett won the ACC. and Kenny Pickett played well against Wake Forest and had a nice stretch run, and people began to appreciate him, what he's really done all year. And Pittsburgh's nowhere near that game without him, obviously. And I think him winning that game, playing well, probably put him in that group of four and took somebody else out, whether that was Will Anderson in Alabama. Alabama fans are a little mad that Aidan Hutchinson repped the defense. And I knew, Des, by the way, I knew a month ago that I was going to have at least one defensive player on my ballot. It was that kind of year for me, where some guys were having good offensive years, but the defensive personality of the season needed to be reflected, I thought. And so Aidan Hutchinson had that monster game against Ohio State, backed it up against Iowa, and you began to appreciate nationally what you knew, what Michigan fans knew, that he had been that way every week pretty much. Yep. That he had gotten better, though, as the bigger games at Penn State, Ohio State, Iowa. Will Anderson's been tremendous all season. It wouldn't shock me to see some ballots come in that have 2 out of the 3 from defense.
You know, Chris, we mentioned this a little bit earlier in the podcast, and we've talked about it all year. So the last defensive player to make the final group there in New York was Manti Te'o back all the way in 2012. So now you got Aidan Hutchinson. Earlier in the year when we had Charles Woodson on, we talked about the possibility of bifurcating the award. What would you think about having an offensive and a defensive Heisman? Because really, you know, no matter how well a defensive player plays, since 1980, there have only been 3 of them that have been at the ceremony. Is that fair?
Could I stop and look up bifurcating for a second before I answer?
I come from the world of golf where they're talking about splitting the rules. Okay.
I got your point. No, I think that it's a fair point. I remember I go way back with this thing. So I was there when Warren Sapp was a finalist, and Warren Sapp made a great joke about, you know, the trophy's got a ball in his hand, right? So he didn't think the defensive players were ever going to get a fair shake. There's been a few guys that have come in there, though. You know, Chase Young, Jabril Peppers, Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu was there. So there have been guys that have been recognized. I think it really is a badge of honor. When you're good enough to be a Heisman finalist as a defensive player, it really says something. I mean, it says something about the impact Aidan Hutchinson had on games. But yeah, you could have a defensive Heisman. I think there are overall defensive awards, whether that's the Bednarik, the Nagurski. There are awards that cover only defensive players. They don't have the same prestige as a Heisman, and nothing else will. So I see the point of your idea. I just think that voters need to be more open-minded. I mean, when Woodson won it, it was pretty, mind-blowing. He of course edged out Peyton Manning, one of the most controversial, talked about Heisman races, one of the ones that caused me great personal strife at the time for being just Des knows. I mean, when you're the host of the show, it's your fault. When your network presents it, it's your fault. You had an agenda. You clearly were biased. We dealt with that a little bit when Derrick Henry, when Mark Ingram edged out Toby Gerhart. Des, you remember that race? It was super close. I mean, so close.
Closest, I think 28 points.
Yeah, exactly. And if 10 first place votes had gone the other way, Toby Gerhart wins. But Stanford was 8-4 that year. Alabama was undefeated, winning the SEC championship. They hadn't had a Heisman. It was desperately important to them. Maybe the people in the South. It was a little more regional back then. It was kind of the end of the regional. And Toby and David Shaw, remember, he's in the room, man. And you guys know David well. I mean, he was stung. He was really, really disappointed that he felt West Coast football was being disrespected, that nobody was paying attention to that conference and the guys weren't getting a chance. And, he might have had a point. I mean, Stanford's come second a lot, with Luck and McCaffrey and guys who are obviously good enough to have won it. If there's that one regional component, it's that West Coast thing that not enough people watch the games out there.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. And just to be clear, I just want to say that when we talk about Manti Te'o being the last defensive player, I'm talking about to have come in the top 3. So not to have been in New York at the ceremony, but it's very, very rare because the ballots ask you for 1, 2, and 3. So that's all they tabulate.
Right. And you mentioned, go ahead. No, you mentioned, I'm saying you mentioned Honey Badger. And I think if Honey Badger didn't get himself suspended that year, he would have won the award. But go ahead.
No, but you could, you could write a book on the what ifs, right? The what ifs of this guy hadn't got suspended, if he hadn't got hurt, if his team. You talk about Kenneth Walker just in terms of being a finalist. He was shut down by Ohio State. They got so far behind that they couldn't emphasize the running game.
Right.
And there's so many interesting layers to this over the years where if this thing hadn't happened, if that thing hadn't happened, some different guy is immortalized in this Heisman club, and the other guy is more forgotten about. Unfortunately, that's the way it goes.
Yeah, poor Peyton Manning. Whoever remembered him.
I'll tell you what, though, man. There's an intimacy to this, Jimmy, and Desmond knows this. We talk about this every year. Even when it seems to be a foregone conclusion, the tension in that room is pretty crackling. And when it's a year like that, Woodson and Manning, there's a ton of tension. Right. And there is Archie and Olivia right there, 8 feet from where I'm standing doing the whole show. And there's Charles' family, and they want desperately to have their son's name read. And when it's not, man, Des can speak to this. I've talked to Tebow about this. It's devastating personally, right? You have no control over what 970 some people vote on, but you feel like you lost. You feel like you let your team down, and you leave the room like gutted sometimes. And then, by the way, Tim won one. So the other 2 times when he's a finalist and here's his name called, it's okay, Tim. I tell him that every year. But, it means so much to so many. And the players feel like, even if they arrive in New York with no chance, right? They shouldn't have listened to people who said, maybe you got this. No, I mean, we know what the vote's going to be, but they still arrive feeling like they let a bunch of people down, and you hate to have that.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because when I won, Gary Moeller, the head coach in Michigan at the time, he sat me down and he said that, hey, you're the best player in college football. You deserve this award. But what he wanted to prepare me for was maybe if there was any type of disappointment, because the previous year, CF, people had assumed that Raghib Ismail from Notre Dame was going to win it. And Ty Detmer, the quarterback at BYU, upset Ismail. So he was like, we never know how these things are going to do. But I think he was setting me up for, if this vote went to the left and you didn't win, then don't feel like you've let us down and you've let anybody down, because you're actually the best player in college football. And for the record, I do believe that Kenneth Walker III should be in New York. I think he should have been a finalist. I don't know which one you remove off of that list, but I do think he had the type of season that Kenneth Walker III should have been one of the top 4. What I'm curious to find out is, what's the difference as far as voting percentages between 3 and 4? Like, how many votes are they getting? That's something that you guys normally talk about after the winner is announced, right, CF?
Yeah, I don't get the winner. Just to be clear, people think that I don't know who wins until basically about a minute before it's announced. That I get the envelope side stage. For many years we've done this, because I want to know if it's one of those surprises that you're talking about. We didn't quite cover it the year that Detmer and Rocket were going for it. We came in '94, but there's been plenty of years. Ingram and Guerra, I wanted to know, because I got to do the interview right away, who's going to win. And so I opened that, and then we do look down, and that's why they used to invite like 5, 6, 7 guys, because if the voting was close, like 4 through 7, they wanted to have everybody there.
Yeah.
The only thing that I think of when I hear you tell that story, Chris, is the only thing I can relate to is back in 2002 at the Olympics in Salt Lake City. It's always a closely kept secret who's going to light the torch. Well, NBC was broadcasting it that year, and I was given the honor of doing the interview with the people who were going to be lighting the torch. And so that I would be prepared, I was told who it was going to be. And I kind of felt like I had a state secret for about 24 hours. And of course, it was the 1980 Olympic team, the Miracle on Ice guys. So, but I think I think that suspense in the room is one of the reasons why so many people not only, love the Heisman, but love the ceremony itself. It's just a great and iconic moment, that moment when the clip is played 1,000 times and you make the announcement and there's the shot of those 4 guys in the front row and they give each other the bro hug and get up. But there's a big exhale, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to Carson Palmer. I've talked over the years to guys that are known for being very cool and composed on the field. I mean, Des can relate to this. I've talked to Tebow about this too. No matter how poised you are when you're on the football field or throughout life, when you're in that room for that hour and you're not sure. I mean, Carson said his heart was coming through his shirt.
I'm sure.
And it wasn't that close. And the same thing with Reggie Bush, the same thing with other guys. You could just see the tension. Bradford and McCoy, that was a pretty close one. Obviously, Oklahoma and Texas are bitter rivals. Both those guys are the top two guys. You could just feel it in the room. And then when the name is read, there is an exhale. There's disappointment. But I think that we try to build the show, Jimmy, around the idea that it's a celebration of all the finalists before the name. And then whatever happens with that envelope being open, then it's about that part after that. So Joe Burrow's going to win it, but everybody remembers the speech that he gave. And that was a surprise. If we budget in about 5 minutes, the average is 5:20, I think, over the last 15 years. But when Joe just goes 7-8 minutes, it gets very tearful, and that kind of emotion that wasn't expected comes out. Right. Wasn't expected by him either. It's beautiful. And Coach O's down there crying. So there's the part before where you celebrate all the guys equally. There's the name, and then there's that moment that we love to see where it begins to hit this guy as he lifts the trophy. Holy, I just won this thing. And then they get the hugs and they realize that they welcome in a new member. That's cool for me too. And Devontae Smith didn't get that moment last year, which is why it felt a little hollow. But we're going to get that. We're going to get that Saturday in this brand new room.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Chris is going to give us his favorite Heisman moment, and we may talk a little bit about the college football playoff, too. We'll be right back.
Back with our friend Chris Fowler, who is, of course, the host of the Heisman Trophy ceremony for 3 decades. He might not like hearing that. He actually might like hearing that. But, Chris, time now for our Heisman moments.
Heisman Trophy winner.
You get to pick one, and I'm sure there are so many. Is there something that stands out as, something you think about when you think about that ceremony?
Yeah, Jimmy, there is. It's easy. It's 1994, the very first year I had the honor of hosting it. I'm a Colorado graduate. Rashaan Salam went to Colorado, and the producer of the show, Jay Rothman, who went on to do a lot of other things in sports, prominent producer, also went to Colorado and produced features for the little college TV show that I did. So to have Rashaan win it, the first year I hosted it in the old Dennett Hill Athletic Club, and have Jay Rothman produce it was incredible. We have a picture with the three of us together. It was super challenging. I was very nervous. The show was hard to execute when you didn't know the landscape. It had never really been a big TV show before. NBC had done it kind of as a halftime show. It had been at the most a half hour, right? So now this was a big production, and there's no teleprompter, there's no script. And we got through it. It was great. Rashaan had his name called. There was a big celebration. There was about, I think, 21 Blarney Stones in New York, but there's one of them that's out the back of the old DAC. I don't know that you ever went in there, Des, but there was a Blarney Stone where we went in there to have a nice celebration. Even Mike Rozier from arch rival Nebraska was there, and he might have stolen a turkey leg off a buffet table and walked out the door.
Maybe not.
And stuck the turkey leg in the pocket of his full-length leather jacket. He might have done that as we went off into the night to celebrate Rashaan winning. So there's nothing like your first time. There's been some tremendous memories, but that one for me is so personal because it involves the alma mater. And obviously, I don't want to get choked up. It became even more powerful and more poignant as Rashaan's life unfolded. And to think that, God, we just hit the 25th anniversary of that a couple of years ago.
Here is the give to Salam. Salam to the outside. He's down to the 50. He's got 2,000. He's on his way. 20, 15, 10, 5. Did he get in? Yes, touchdown. Touchdown, Rashaan Salam. This place is coming apart. Rashaan Salam, whole team going down. 67 yards. Touchdown for Rashaan Salam, and he goes over 2,000 with that run.
That will always be special, and I don't think it'll be ever quite the same. Now we become like seasoned pros, and you produce this show. But when you're just a young kid and it's all new, and you're wide-eyed, and you remember how bad CU was when you were there, and we got a Heisman winner a few years later, It was pretty cool.
Yeah. You talked about your first show, and I always wanted to know, where were you, and what was your reaction when you got the news that you were going to be able to host the Heisman Trophy ceremony?
I had covered it before then. You talked about, Andre Ware, Detmer, who wasn't there. Andre wasn't there either. They were playing games the day they won the Heisman. So I was in that room just as a reporter for a few years watching Bob Costas, watching NBC do it. And then when we got news that we were going to be able to present it, I knew right then that was going to be exciting. We were going to make a big deal out of it. And I don't remember exactly where I was, but as we begin to get towards that 94 season, it was pretty exciting. It was pretty nerve-wracking. A lot of stuff used to happen in the old DAC, man. I mean, we used to have power hits. We all of a sudden, like the power in Lower Manhattan would go out on a Saturday night. I don't know what was going on. Maybe the nightclubs cranked up their sound system down there, and we would get these power hits, and we would lose. We lost a camera. We lost a monitor. I remember doing one show.
That's live television, my friend.
I know, Jimmy, but we're instruments only. I mean, you couldn't see the show in the room. We had no monitors in there. All of a sudden, you know what cameras you're going to use, except now we lost camera 4. That blew up. So and that you talk about anxiety. I mean, we got through it, and there used to be a bar in the back of the room. Like, you know, the old DAC had a bar in the room, in the back. A few guys, past winners, would be back there, you know, in the middle of the show. Because you just couldn't make it through the hour without, you know, a little help me. But I was right back there that year. I was right back there as soon as the show got off the air, because that was pretty hair raising.
What was one of the funniest moments you've experienced as a host of the Heisman Ceremony? Because the reason I'm asking you is because we take questions, and someone asked me a similar question last week, and I said, well, it wasn't really funny, but it was kind of, you know, it gets a little bit much, because anytime there's an Oklahoma Sooner up for the award, we have Billy Sims in attendance, we always getting that boomer, and I'm like, man, you know, CF is trying to host this show, but every like 11 seconds on the dot, boomer. I'm like, all right, Billy, we get it.
He thought Chris Berman was there.
Yeah, exactly. You do have to factor in when Oklahoma has a finalist. You're right, Des. They're going to have those interruptions, and it's going to be Billy Sims, and you got to explain what's going on if you feel like it. I mean, I'd say for me, I mean, I don't know if it wasn't funny at the time. I can laugh about it now, but the previous home for the Heisman before our new location on Saturday was a theater that was the underground, kind of just off Times Square. It was the Best Buy theater for a while. It had about 3 different names. And part of the stage set, there was a big rack that all the portraits sat on, and you had to duck your head down to get under it. I was looking at my cards and preoccupied with the show. I smacked my head so hard on this metal support that, like, I mean, if it hit me at the wrong angle, I would have like bled out, I think, during the show. And I don't know if we have a contingency for that. As it was, I think I had like post-concussion or something. It really did like jar me for a second. And I'm thinking, well, you better collect yourself and go out there and get this done, because it takes your fastball to do this. You've all done shows like you don't want to try to nibble on the edges and get them out with the off-speed stuff on the Heisman. You want to have the fastball.
Yeah.
And you, even though you try, it doesn't happen every year. And I'm thinking, like, am I going to get through this thing? Because I was seeing stars. So Not funny at the time, but funny in retrospect.
So you also had an interesting situation. We were just talking about this earlier with Reggie Bush when he won the award, because we've talked about the finite nature of television. It's supposed to start here and end here, but it doesn't always work out that way.
No, we had to have a conversation after that Heisman show, because there are people that get a lot of pressure from the network to get the thing off on time, right? But you never know how long the guy's going to go. So how do you budget time for a speech that is, you know, free flowing, right? But some guys you think, okay, he's not that talkative. He's not going to be effusive. He's not going to be emotional. Well, Reggie caught a lot of people off guard because he got very emotional. And he talked about his dad, who was down there in the front row, and his teammate Leinart was there, of course. And, you know, he'd waited his turn. I think there was still some suspense. Was Reggie going to win it? I don't know what he felt in his heart. He goes up there and he goes on and on and on. And, you know, the speech ends the show, right? So a producer is yelling in my ear. He's actually a coordinating producer. He's one of the bosses, yelling in my ear, get out there, do something. What do you mean, do something? What am I going to do? I mean, he's having his moment. He's pouring his heart out. He's crying. And so I tried to here's the podium. I'm inching a little closer because I stay off the stage for this part. And when he's done, I walk out. Now I kind of stepped out on the edge of the stage. And I get a little closer. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to hook Reggie Bush. Are you kidding me? I'm going to walk out there. Hey, listen, I mean, we don't have music to play them off like we do at the Oscars, which I think is kind of rude too at that point. You win a thing like the Oscar or the Heisman Trophy. It's your moment, man. I'm not going out there to hook you. So,
well,
let it play out.
Were you hoping that the suggestion, that like the physical suggestion of you getting there might clue him into the fact that it was time?
You're hoping, but I'm not. That's as close as I'm getting. I'm getting about 5 feet away, and I'm stopping. And if he doesn't see me out of the corner of my eye and figure, but you listen. I mean, Des, no, you're not the most self-aware at that moment. You're just your head is spinning. It probably feels like an out-of-body experience for a lot of these guys, and everything that's gone into it, and all the people that helped you get there, it comes out, and that's what happened with Burrow. It's what happened with a lot of other guys. It's beautiful when you have that moment. I think people want you to show them what it means. That's right. That's why we love championship television. That's why I watch events where I'm not that clued into a sport all season, but when that trophy's handed out, I want to see that. Jimmy, you talked about tennis. That's the beautiful thing for me. And I always feel like at the end of it, if a woman or a guy doesn't get all emotional, if they don't show you what it means, you're kind of let down.
Hey, Chris, one of the things that I always think about when it comes to that is one of the most memorable kind of scenes in sports, certainly in the last 30, 40 years, was Yana Novotná not winning at Wimbledon.
Yeah. And then crying on the shoulder of the Duchess.
Yes.
It's very famous. And being consoled by her is a very sweet moment in Wimbledon history. And that's part of it too. I don't necessarily want to see the Heisman guys crying or disappointed when they don't get their name called.
On the Duchess of Kent's shoulder.
I don't want to see that. Yeah, going up and grabbing Des and what happened? I think that, but I think the joy you want to see, and however they express it, they got to be themselves. But I think when you see unexpected emotion is when it's even more special.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I want to switch gears right quick because we got you, and I got to take advantage of this opportunity. I always talk about the college football playoff and how it's better for the sport in general when there's new blood in the college football playoff. So now, normally you would pencil in Clemson, pencil in Oklahoma and Ohio State, but now we have three teams. We have Georgia, we have Michigan, and then we have our first group of 5 team in the college football playoff. How do you feel about that? And isn't that better for the sport?
I feel better about than Lee Corso. I watch you guys on game day all year long, and it's been obviously very, very polarizing. Cincinnati. I think Corso would have picked a 4-loss team, right? A group of 5 team, right? I mean, hey man, I think it's right. I think it's good. I do think it's good for the sport. I think inclusivity has been what people have been hollering about. I think this year the way things worked out, Notre Dame could make an argument, but not a very good one because they lost to Cincy on their home field by 11, right? So that's kind of case closed for me. And the Bearcats were undefeated, and Oklahoma State lost, so they had no case at the end. So in the end, the committee had a pretty easy choice.
Exactly.
Now, Cincinnati fans can feel like, why did we get seeded 4th and not higher and avoid that top seed?
Yeah.
But I think them being included checks a box. They're off to the Big 12, so they won't be group of 5 very long. And I think to have it happen one year is good. Now, listen, they got to go do what Utah did when Utah beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, and Boise State did great when they had their moments to show what they were about when they beat Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl. UCF beat Auburn, lost to LSU one year, but they had a chance against 2 SEC teams. Hey, here goes Cincinnati. Welcome to the club. Step through the door, and there's big Alabama waiting for you, the ultimate dynasty. So the story sets up like that, and the Bearcats are obviously going to be big underdogs. But, we're headed for expansion in the playoff. It's going to happen. But I think in this 4-team era, it's nice that a group of 5 team got in there, and they earned the right to be there, I think.
Let me hit you on that whole thing, the expansion thing, because that's been a topic of discussion here on the podcast all year long. So, of course, as everybody knows, we're at 4 now. Earlier in the year, this idea of 12 was floated. Personally, I hate expansion to that level. At the very most, I might like to see 6 teams and give the top 2 a bye, because I think by expanding so much, what you do is devalue the regular season. What do you think?
It does if you view it that way, that no one regular season game would have the importance. Baylor, Oklahoma State, like that moment at the end of the game as he reaches for the pylon and comes up a few inches short and they lose the conference title. Let's say it's a 12-team bracket, Jimmy, where you got the Power 5 plus the Group of 5. You get 6 at-large teams. Oklahoma State's in the playoff. Ohio State's in the playoff. Utah. Now, the good thing is teams like Utah would get in. Utah had a great year, a slow start, lost a couple games early, got settled in, won the Pac-12 in emphatic fashion. The Rose Bowl is a great prize for them. Maybe there's years when you'd like to see those teams rewarded. Pittsburgh would have been in as the ACC champions. The first year you got 3 Power 5 conferences not represented, which really amplifies the conversation about expansion. But no doubt, you have 12 teams, which a lot of these conferences want. You're going to have probably 3 SEC teams almost every year. There'll be a case for 4 some years, unless you cap it. So it's going to be a very, very different thing. And I think you're going to have teams coming off losses. And with Georgia coming off a loss this year is very different. Not typically have that. A team losing their conference championship game, then going in as a favorite in their semifinal against Michigan. So it'd be very, very different. Inclusivity is powerful, but it's going to dilute things. It's going to change the equation fundamentally. I think if you jump from 4 to 12, you get 11 playoff games, though, which is good for TV money. Let's be honest. That's a lot of what it's about.
Yeah. Listen, just give me your idea of what an ideal number for the playoffs would be.
I wanted to give the 14 bracket a try. To me, 8 is more ideal than 12 because it limits the number of at-large teams. You're still going to have the conference champions. You're going to have that Cinderella conference champion some year where a team gets in at 8-5 perhaps. But to me, that makes more sense because, by the way, we haven't talked about what it means for the players to layer on another game. And exactly. I've seen this, since 2014, when teams are playing their 15th game and it's for the championship and they're banged up and beat up and it comes, you get a little bit of rest after the semifinal, but more than a normal week. But man, the toll it takes on guys, and there's so many injuries in teams this year that I wonder, it does, as an ex-player, it matters that the players be considered. You just put another layer on there and you're asking, I think you're making it harder for teams that don't have deep, stacked 4- and 5-star rosters to get there, even harder than it is now because attrition is going to be a factor.
No, that's a great point. I'm pro player. Like, I'm always representing the players. I've said players should get, paid for their likeness way before it became popular to say that. So I'm on board. And I'm glad you mentioned that because people don't think about that. They don't think about the toll that it takes on these players physically and mentally. So that's a great point. Chris, you've been very, very generous with your time. Really greatly appreciate you coming on the podcast. I know you got this little Heisman ceremony you got to get ready for. So thanks again for coming on, my man. Appreciate you. And I'll see you.
I got my notes, man. I got my materials here.
Chris, it's good to see you.
Likewise, guys. Really enjoyed it. Happy to be a part of it.
I'll see you in New York.